Imagine a cold, kindy, starless night in the American South. You are a federal narcotics agent, sitting completely still inside an unmarked car, the engine cut, the headlights entirely dark. You are exhausted, running on lukewarm coffee and pure, unfiltered adrenaline, staring through the heavy, green-tinted lens of a night vision scope. You have spent the last 18 months of your life hunting the most violent, ruthless criminal syndicate the world has ever seen, the Medellin Cartel. For weeks, you and your specialized team have tracked a ghost plane, a heavily modified twin-engine aircraft flying just above the tree line, dropping massive, heavy duffel bags of pure Colombian cocaine into the quiet, forgotten forests of your state. And tonight, you finally have them cornered. You watch, holding your breath, as the phantom plane touches down on the unlit runway of a rural dirt airstrip, its engines cutting out into an eerie, suffocating silence. You grip your radio tightly, your finger hovering over the transmission button, ready to call in the raid, ready to make the biggest, most career-defining bust of your entire life. But as the heavy cargo doors swing open in the darkness, the men stepping out onto the tarmac are not cartel thugs. They are not wearing cheap street clothes, and they are not speaking Spanish. They are wearing specialized tactical gear, carrying military-grade suppressed weapons, and they are flashing credentials that belong to the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States. Your blood runs instantly, paralyzingly cold. The drugs, the millions of dollars of narcotics flooding into your country, destroying your cities and funding gang wars, aren't being smuggled past the government. They are being smuggled by the government. And in that horrifying, reality-shattering second, you realize you have just uncovered a secret so massive, so deeply buried in the bureaucratic shadows, that it could get you completely erased from existence. We are taught that during the 1980s, the United States waged a heroic, uncompromising war on drugs. We are shown archival footage of politicians on our television screens, looking directly into the cameras with severe expressions, promising to clean up the streets, promising to hunt down the foreign cartel bosses who were poisoning American youth. We are told that the intelligence agencies, the Border Patrol, and the military were the ultimate, unbreakable shield against the terrifying forces of the underworld. But what if the history books we trust are hiding a massive, blood-soaked illusion? What if the very institutions sworn to protect the public, the agencies funded by taxpayer dollars, were secretly shaking hands with the devil? This is the dark, heavily redacted, and utterly terrifying reality of a small, seemingly innocent town called Mena, Arkansas. This is the true story of how the highest levels of the American national security apparatus chose to actively sacrifice their own people to fund a classified, illegal shadow war. To understand the sheer, breathtaking scale of this betrayal, you have to look away from the neon lights of the 1980s and look toward the dense, war-torn jungles of Central America. It is 1984. The Cold War is raging across the globe, and the United States government is absolutely terrified of communism spreading into their own hemisphere. In the small, unstable nation of Nicaragua, a socialist government known as the Sandinistas has taken total power. For the CIA and the White House, this is an unacceptable existential threat, a Soviet foothold right in America's backyard. They desperately want to fund a rebel army, a heavily armed right-wing paramilitary group known as the Contras, to violently overthrow the Nicaraguan government. There is just one massive, insurmountable problem. The United States Congress, representing the legal will of the American people, looks at the brutal, bloody, and often terroristic tactics of these Contra rebels and explicitly passes legislation making it completely illegal for the CIA or the Pentagon to give them a single dollar. This legislation is known as the Boland Amendment. The funding is officially cut. The operation is supposed to be dead in the water. But in the dark, windowless rooms of Washington, D.C., the intelligence elite do not take no for an answer. They view congressional oversight as a mere inconvenience, a hurdle to be bypassed by any means necessary. If they cannot get legal, transparent money from Congress, they decide they will get dark money from the shadows. They need an off-the-books revenue stream, a pipeline of untraceable cash and heavy weapons that no congressional committee can ever audit or uncover. And so, the Central Intelligence Agency looks for a partner. They do not look for a traditional military ally. They do not look for a foreign government. They look for a man named Barry Seal. Barry Seal is not a typical cartel enforcer, and he is certainly not a trained, disciplined spy. He is quite simply one of the most brilliant, daring, and reckless pilots in American aviation history. A former commercial airline pilot who became bored with the routine. Seal discovered he possessed a terrifying genius for aerial smuggling. Operating out of a sleepy, forgotten municipal airport in the tiny town of Mena, Arkansas, Seal has built a multi-million-dollar criminal empire doing what law enforcement thought was impossible. He flies his heavily modified aircraft deep into the treacherous mountains of Colombia, directly into the hidden, heavily guarded jungle compounds of Pablo Escobar and the Ochoa brothers. He loads his planes with thousands of pounds of pure, unadulterated cocaine, evades military radar by flying mere feet above the ocean waves, outruns advanced customs fighter jets, and drops the drugs precisely over the remote swamps of Louisiana and the open fields of Arkansas. He is making millions of dollars every single week, laundering the cash through dummy corporations, laughing at the DEA, and operating the most successful untouchable smuggling ring in the entire country. He is exactly the kind of man the government should be locking away in a maximum security prison for the rest of his natural life. Instead, they decide to recruit him. Operatives from the CIA, working closely with a shadow network inside the National Security Council, approach Barry Seal with a terrifying, unprecedented, and highly classified deal. They tell him that he can keep flying. He can keep bringing thousands of pounds of cartel cocaine directly into the United States. The federal government will look the other way. They will purposefully blind the domestic radars. They will call off the federal agents hunting him down. In exchange, Seal has to do the agency a favor. When he flies south to Colombia to pick up Escobar's drugs, he must first make a critical detour. His planes will be loaded to the brim with illegal military-grade weapons, assault rifles, heavy explosives, and thousands of rounds of ammunition, supplied directly by the CIA's shadow logistics network. He will drop these weapons into the dense jungles for the Contra rebels, completing the government's illegal off-the-books supply chain. Then he will continue south, load up with the cartel's cocaine, and fly back to the United States. The cartel gets their drugs, the CIA gets their untraceable war, and the American public unknowingly pays the ultimate devastating price. Suddenly, the quiet, rural airport in Mena, Arkansas, a quaint town of barely 5,000 people, transforms into the beating epicenter of the global drug trade. Massive unmarked military cargo planes, including a massive C-123 transport aircraft that Seal affectionately named the Fat Lady, take off and land in the dead of night. Men in dark suits, carrying briefcases stuffed with unrecorded cash and highly classified documents, are seen walking the tarmac alongside known international smugglers and cartel associates. The sheer volume of narcotics flowing through this single, government-protected pipeline is almost impossible to comprehend. It is not just a few duffel bags hidden in a trunk. It is tons upon tons of pure cocaine, a relentless, uninterrupted flood of narcotics. It floods the streets of American cities, from the sunlit corners of Miami to the sprawling neighborhoods of Los Angeles and Chicago, sparking the catastrophic crack cocaine epidemic. It fuels an unprecedented era of addiction, gang violence, and innocent deaths. But the most heartbreaking, the most deeply enraging part of this tragedy is what happens to the honest men and women who are desperately trying to stop it. Across the country, frontline DEA agents, state police investigators, and local sheriffs are risking their lives every single day, fighting a war they genuinely believe in. They are kicking down doors in the middle of the night, taking bullets in the streets, and burying their partners. They painstakingly track the cartel money. They follow the planes. They build airtight, undeniable criminal cases against Barry Seal and his sprawling network of associates. Local Arkansas investigators, like State Police Investigator Russell Welch and IRS Investigator William Duncan, dedicate years of their lives to exposing the Mena operation. They gather the financial records, They prepare the search warrants, and they march into federal courtrooms expecting the justice system to work. But every single time they get close, every time they are about to put the handcuffs on the kingpins and shut the operation down, a dark, impenetrable shadow falls over the investigation. Phone calls are quietly made from the highest offices in Washington. Massive, detailed case files are suddenly seized, classified, and locked away in secure federal vaults under the vague, unassailable guise of national security. Local police are explicitly ordered by federal authorities to stand down, to look the other way, to drop the cases entirely, or face the destruction of their own careers. Honest investigators, men who have sworn a sacred oath to uphold the law, watch in absolute paralyzing despair as their own government protects the very criminals poisoning their communities. They realize with a sickening, terrifying clarity that the war on drugs is a rigged game, a theatrical performance designed to pacify the public. The frontline agents are nothing more than expendable pawns, sacrificed to maintain the illusion of justice on the evening news. While the kings in Washington move billions of dollars of dark money across the geopolitical board, the CIA is not fighting the cartel. They are actively, deliberately shielding them. But as the Mena operation grows to a massive, uncontrollable scale, so does the paranoia of the men running it. Barry Seal, the man at the dead center of this terrifying, tangled web, begins to realize that he has become a massive, walking liability. He knows far too much about the cartel. He knows far too much about the CIA. He knows the exact names, the dates, the bank accounts, and the flight paths that directly connect the White House to the jungle hideouts of Pablo Escobar. He is the single fragile thread that could unravel the entire geopolitical cover-up and send top politicians to federal prison. And in the dark, ruthless world of international espionage and organized crime, liabilities are never, ever allowed to survive. The government forces Seal to fly one last incredibly dangerous mission. They equip his cargo plane with hidden military cameras and order him to photograph high-ranking Sandinista officials loading cocaine onto his aircraft in Nicaragua. The administration desperately wants these photos to prove to the American public that the communists are dealing drugs, hoping to sway public opinion and finally secure legal congressional funding for their Contra war. Seal flies the mission. He gets the photos. But then, in a move of staggering, calculated betrayal, someone within the highest levels of the United States government intentionally leaks those classified photos to the national press. They leak the photos, and they purposefully leak Barry Seal's identity as a government informant. Overnight, his cover is completely blown. Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel now know that their best smuggler, the man who holds the blueprints to their entire operation, is working with the CIA and the DEA. A multi-million-dollar bounty is immediately placed on his head. Seal knows he is a dead man walking. He begs his government handlers for protection. He practically pleads to be placed in the federal witness security program. But the government he helped fund, the intelligence agencies that used him to run their shadow war, completely and silently abandon him. They cut all ties. They leave him entirely exposed to the wrath of the cartel. A federal judge, seemingly ignoring the massive, highly publicized target on Seal's back, sentences him to a bizarrely lenient, yet utterly fatal punishment for a minor drug charge. He is ordered to spend his nights at a Salvation Army halfway house in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a publicly known, completely unsecured location with absolutely no armed guards allowed. It is not a judicial sentence. It is a carefully orchestrated execution order. On a cold evening in February 1986, as Barry Seal sits in his Cadillac outside the halfway house, a team of heavily armed Colombian assassins silently approaches his vehicle. They raise their MAC-10 submachine guns and open fire in the crowded parking lot, riddling his body and his car with bullets. Barry Seal dies instantly, slumped over the steering wheel, his secrets dying with him. His silence is permanently secured. The ultimate loose end is violently tied up. Shortly after his assassination, a CIA-funded cargo plane is shot down over the jungles of Nicaragua, and the illegal funding of the Contras is finally exposed to the public in what becomes known as the infamous Iran-Contra affair. There are massive televised congressional hearings. There is public outrage. There are bold headlines demanding answers from the president. But the deepest, darkest secrets of Mena, Arkansas, the sheer devastating scale of the cartel drugs allowed into the country, and the complete complicity of the intelligence agencies in the destruction of American cities, remain buried. They are expertly hidden behind walls of heavy black redactions, sealed congressional testimonies, and blanket national security classifications. The men who drafted these operations, the high-ranking officials who consciously traded American lives for geopolitical leverage, do not face the justice system. They quietly retire with full government pensions, write best-selling memoirs, and fade into history. No one in Washington goes to prison for the cocaine. No one is held accountable for the destroyed communities, the shattered families, or the dedicated police officers whose careers and lives were ruined. The bureaucratic machine simply recalibrates, cleans up the paperwork, and moves on to the next covert war. We look back at the 1980s, and we remember the neon lights, the pop music, and the powerful political speeches promising a safer, drug-free world for our children. We desperately want to believe that the lines between the good guys and the bad guys are clearly drawn in black and white. We want to believe that the monsters only exist outside our borders, hiding in foreign jungles or distant capitals. But the ghosts of Mena, Arkansas, the lingering phantom hum of those unmarked cargo planes flying through the dark, force us to confront a deeply unsettling, terrifying reality. When the protectors of a nation decide that the law no longer applies to them, when they decide that funding a secret war is worth the violent, systemic destruction of their own streets, who are we really fighting? And more importantly, when the government acts exactly like the cartel, who is left to protect us? If you are fascinated by the terrifying truths that hide in the blind spots of history, if you want to know what else is buried deep within the classified archives of the world, do yourself a favor. Hit subscribe and join the family. I'm your host, and you're watching Decoding Myths. Remember, the truth never really disappears. It just sits in the shadows, waiting to be dragged out.